Sissy Spacek as the young country singer Loretta Lynn, and Tommy Lee Jones as her husband in Coal Miner's Daughter, one of 4 new movies we'll be taking a look at on this edition of Sneak Previews, 2 film critics reviewing the new movies in town. And across the aisle from me is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
And this is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, in addition to Coal Miner's Daughter, which I think is going to end up being one of the year's very best films, Roger and I will review Otto Preminger's new spy movie, The Human Factor, also a film of Henry James's novel, The Europeans. But first, Roger begins with a Dutch movie, a thriller about World War II called Soldier of Orange.
You know, war movies usually seem to come in 2 varieties. Either they're multi-million-dollar blockbusters in which the human values get totally lost, or they're intimate little stories in which we never really feel the overwhelming reality of war. But Soldier of Orange seems to get both dimensions in focus. It's about the wartime experiences of a Dutch hero and 5 of his close friends, and it suggests what the Second World War meant to them in individual terms and also how it altered the face of history. The movie begins in Holland as news of the outbreak of war interrupts a tennis game.
15 love. Yours? Yes!
Yes, Eric!
Yours! Mine? 30 love. Damn! 30, 15.
Shut up, you!
Our program is activated in order to broadcast a special communique.
Who's a very bad loser. Here, catch.
England is at war with Germany.
What?
This morning, a final note was handed to the German government, but no reply has been received.
It's
Consequently,
war!
from this moment, England is in a state of war with Germany. There will now be a statement by the Prime Minister.
I am speaking to you in the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin...
It is war.
Ah, those Englishmen.
We'll remain neutral, as always.
Don't be so bloody stupid, Jack.
What's all that about?
Oh, well, he's Jewish.
Doesn't look like one.
Ah, fool.
Oh, shut up. What's the score?
Deuce.
Soldier of Orange follows a lot of those young men. Some of them become heroes, some become traitors, some are held as prisoners, and some eventually die. The movie is based on the memoirs of Erich Hazelhoff, a real-life spy who traveled dangerously back and forth between England and German-occupied Holland. And in this scene, Hazelhoff watches as his comrades leave Holland to be picked up by seaplane and taken to England. But a Nazi patrol boat breaks up their rendezvous at sea.
That's it. They're here. Come on. Here it is. Into the boat.
We'll meet again soon.
In London. Hurry up. Here. This is what you're taking to London. Make sure it gets there. German patrol! Robbie!
Soldier of Orange is a large-scale, intelligent, exciting war movie, and it's opening slowly around the country. It's opening several cities at a time, and I think it's worth looking for.
I agree with you. There are some slow patches. It's actually boring in some spots, as far as I'm concerned. I like it for the very reason that you mentioned, which is that it's somewhere between the epic scale and the small personal story. Another kind of odd reason why I like it has to do with the fact that, you know, most war movies present this evil cabal of men that must be defeated by the good guys, and they're on the side of God, and they'll vanquish them from the face of the earth. Well, this movie is a little bit more realistic, a little more wise about the human nature in war. It says that wars exist as a natural course of events for human beings, and that people react differently. They react somehow beyond forces of their control, and some act very much in control of what they're doing. Very matter-of-fact telling of a war story. I liked it for that reason.
I agree with your word realistic. This, of course, is a real-life story. It's based on the memoirs of a real man who really went through these experiences, and somehow watching the movie is like the experience of listening to this guy talk rather directly, simply, and modestly about the extraordinary things that happened to him. He's not bragging. He's not a great Superman. He's not a Dutch Audie Murphy with wooden shoes on. These things happened. He got through as best he could, and it turned out pretty well for him, actually. So that tone of the movie is quite a change from most war movies.
And that's probably the tone of our recommendation, which is that it's a pretty good film, not the greatest picture ever made, but a good story.
Fine.
Our next film is Otto Preminger's new spy story, The Human Factor. The movie stars Nicole Williamson as a British intelligence agent named Castle, suspected of being a spy for the Russians. He's called into his superior's office, where he's introduced to the new chief of internal security, Richard Attenborough, who suspects Williamson may be the security leak he's been trying to uncover.
Come in. Ah, Castle, come in. I don't think you know Colonel Daintree.
How do you do?
Sit down.
I think I knew a cousin of yours at Cambridge.
Colonel Daintree's just joined the firm. He's taken over security.
I suppose you mean my cousin Roger. I haven't seen him for years. He's at the Treasury. He got a first in mathematics. I got a poor third in history, so I'm in the Secret Service.
I explained to Colonel Daintree that only you and Davis deal with top-secret cables as far as Section 6A is concerned.
Of course, Watson is in charge of 6. He sees them, too.
Davis was at Reading University, I believe.
You've been having a chat with him, have you?
Well, I talked to Davis about you, so now I'm talking to you about Davis. It's an open check. I gather that politically he's a bit on the left, hmm?
Oh, yes, he's a member of the Labour Party.
And you?
I have no politics, as Davis no doubt told you.
Well, there's nothing personal in all this, you know, but it's, one's got to stick with the drill.
Of course.
I shan't keep you long. I have a train to catch at King's Cross.
The shooting weekend?
Yes, how did you know? Oh, yes, elementary.
My dear Watson.
The old rifle in the corner of the room trick. At this point, very early into the movie, I thought I was watching a comedy of manners, but the human factor shimmies all over the place, sometimes romantic, sometimes world-weary, but never, oddly enough, very thrilling. Later in the film, Robert Morley, an undercover intelligence officer, speculates with an associate on who the security leak could be.
I know where Davis was last Monday morning.
Huh?
At the zoo.
So?
He told Castle he was going to the dentist.
Did he meet anyone?
No, but he was waiting for somebody. He had a report with him.
It's all very circumstantial.
John, I'm convinced he's our man.
What about Watson? He's the one who hasn't been with us long.
With his vetting, he wouldn't get away with a communist wet nurse. Then there's Castle. Even less likely. Son of an old-fashioned family doctor. Mother was a head warden during the Blitz. Attends Conservative Party rallies.
Well, that clears the mother, of course.
He's a good son. He visits her every month. Good family man, careful with money, moderate with drink. Wouldn't have the imagination to be a double agent.
And when we are sure, have you decided how we act?
We're working on a cute little scheme, John. Groundnuts.
Groundnuts?
As you know, groundnuts. Like peanuts.
I do know what a groundnut is, Emmanuel. I was a commissioner in Nigeria for 6 years.
Apparently, when they go bad, they produce a mold. The mold produces something called aflatoxin. Waiter.
Now, that seems like a pleasant little British comedy, but it's not. Williamson is married to a black South African woman. The film gets preachy about race relations and also about personal freedom. There's this subplot about how human beings are all trapped into the little boxes of life's organizational chart. But that point is laid on awfully thick. So for me, The Human Factor is simply a film that sputters with a lot of inconsistency, although I've got to admit it's nicely acted by a strong cast.
This is a film that I liked, I think, a good deal more than you did. And the thing I liked about it was this thing I love about British thrillers in general, and that is they do the most terrible things, poisonings and murders and double crossings and so forth, as perfect gentlemen. They have that wonderful reserve as bodies are falling into the Thames and so forth. And in this case, I usually don't think it's very relevant at all whether or not a movie is faithful to a book or unfaithful to a book, as if it were a marriage or something. But it is true that if anyone has read the Graham Greene book that this movie is based on, the movie is amazingly accurate in terms of the version of the book.
Well, that pleasure that you mentioned at first about it, the horrible deeds done in a gentlemanly way, to me that's a trivial point. I mean, in other words, I've seen that before, so I see it again, big deal. I wanted a little more juice. We see some very fine actors, and I just wanted them to get off their emotional reserve, if you will. You're liking the reserve, and I'm thinking, this is boring me. I really was not intrigued by it, Raj. I thought it was a minor film, played out at a very low emotional level that communicated the same to me, which made me tired and not particularly excited about it.
Well, now, I'm not saying it's the greatest thriller I've ever seen, but I did love those performances. Morley, we hardly ever see in the movies.
He's terrific.
Nicol Williamson, Richard Attenborough. I give it a recommendation.
Okay, and I don't.
And you don't. Okay, here's a movie I know we agree on. Coal Miner's Daughter, based on the best-selling autobiography by Loretta Lynn, the country and western star, who was born in Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, got married at 13 and had 4 kids by the time she was 20 years old. The movie begins with Loretta Lynn's childhood near the coal mines of Kentucky and follows her right through to her big break on the Grand Ole Opry, to stardom, and then to the onstage breakdown that always seems to be required in all showbiz pictures, and finally, of course, to the big comeback. But Coal Miner's Daughter is a lot more than just another rags-to-riches show business saga. For one thing, it centers around a wonderful performance by Sissy Spacek, who plays Loretta Lynn as a lovable, simple, honest country girl. You can sense those qualities in this scene where she's hiding from her husband in a nightclub bathroom. He wants her to get out there and sing, but she's just plain scared. That's not Loretta Lynn singing. That's Sissy Spacek singing the song. She does a real good job in her own voice. Her husband is played by Tommy Lee Jones, and a great deal of the movie involves the ups and downs of their turbulent marriage. He's portrayed as a hard-nosed, hard-driving, ambitious man, doesn't coddle his wife, who almost literally pushes her onto the stage. And some of the best scenes in Coal Miner's Daughter show him guiding her in the early days of her career. Here he's posing her for some do-it-yourself homemade publicity photos.
back, drop back on bed.
Coal Miner's Daughter is the fascinating story of an American life which is all the more amazing because it's so improbable. It's an absorbing story all the way through, especially because of Sissy Spacek's performance. And you know, she ages in this film from 13 into her 30s, and I don't know how she does it.
She's a remarkable actress. I think she's 29 or 30 years old. She's a real chameleon, a great American actress. As much as you like this picture, I liked it a lot more, if that's possible. I think it's going to be a big hit. For a lot of weeks, it's going to bring a lot of pleasure to a lot of people. A fine, fine film, especially in its images, not big scenes, but just single shots, quiet shots. There's a shot of Loretta Lynn's house at the end of the picture, a big, beautiful house, sort of an Elvis Presley mansion. We know it's been gotten at a certain price. We see what the price is. She says early on when she plays Grand Ole Opry for the first time, this is going to be my greatest moment. It is her greatest moment, because then she becomes a success. We see the price of success, which is that you got to keep being a success. You got to please audiences, not just yourself anymore. We know these ideas, I think, but we learn them beautifully in quiet images in this exceptional film.
One of the lovely ways this film brings out that price of success is in another relationship we haven't talked about yet, and that's Loretta Lynn's relationship with Patsy Cline, the veteran country and western singer who's played by Beverly D'Angelo. And she takes the younger girl under her arm. She becomes her mentor, takes her as her protege, takes her out on the road with her on tour. And you'd think that these two women would be fighting with each other, but they don't, because they totally identify with the experiences they've both gone through. They started from humble beginnings. They're big stars. They love to perform, yet there's tremendous pressure. And that relationship, that friendship, is so well done in the film. I really liked it.
People have been clamoring for French women on the screen. This is a beautiful example of it in a, I just want to say again, a fabulous motion picture. I liked it a real lot.
So Coal Miner's Daughter gets a real sneak previews endorsement,
Absolutely. Our next film, The Europeans, based on Henry James's novel, which tells of a conniving brother and sister who returned to America from Europe to 1850s suburban Boston to visit a family of wealthy cousins, all in an effort to marry into some easy money. Lee Remick stars as the gold-digging sister who's been living in Europe as some kind of countess. Her brother tells her about a man who might make a good catch.
I think that you'll like Mr. Acton. He's a man of the world. He's been to China.
A man of the Chinese world. He sounds very interesting.
I have an idea he brought home a fortune.
Ah, that's always interesting.
The film is very good looking. The houses and the scenery are beautiful. In fact, this movie got a well-deserved Academy Award nomination for its costumes. But the human performances are rather lifeless, particularly Lee Remick, who never seems to get into her character, even when she's on the verge of falling in love.
I'm sure you find it very strange that I should come to this part of the world. I'm certain you're wondering about my motives. They're very pure.
No, I don't find it at all strange that a clever woman should turn up in Boston, or its suburbs. It's a very fine place, especially at this moment.
It was precisely not to hear such things that I came. I longed to come into those natural relations I knew I should find here. Over there, I had only artificial relations. Do you see the difference?
I suppose I'm an artificial relation. Well, there's one way in which a lady and a gentleman may easily become natural.
Yes.
This is not a bad film, just awfully slow. We're always way ahead of the story as it develops, and the point it makes about Americans feeling inferior to anything and everything European, well, that stayed in the film's first 5 minutes and then repeated over and over. So, The Europeans, to my mind, is a good-looking film that is really more of an art director's achievement. In other words, better costumes than a compelling story.
I'm in complete agreement with you. One of the things I like about Henry James's novels is the way that beneath that surface, which is always so stylized and mannered, you have these enormous depths of boiling passion and turmoil and jealousy and greed. And in this film, they have the surface painted perfectly, but there's nothing underneath. I think you're absolutely right that we don't care about the characters at all.
Well, here's somebody I do care about. Spot the Wonder Dog, reminding us it's time for Dog of the Week, where we each pick the week's worst movie. What rotten flick have you seen lately?
Okay, Gene. My dog this week is Midnight Madness, a real disappointment from the Disney organization, which isn't even putting the Walt Disney name on this picture because of some fairly mild PG-rated jokes. The movie's about an all-night scavenger hunt, and I guess Midnight Madness is supposed to be a PG-rated version of Animal House, but the plot is a mess. The characters race aimlessly around Los Angeles, and the slapstick gags aren't funny either, not even a character falling blissfully into a vat of beer. Another strange thing is how nasty this movie is towards some of its characters. It fills the screen with odd-looking people and then makes fun of the way they look, and that leaves us feeling kind of shabby. Movies should leave us feeling a lot better than Midnight Madness does, and for that matter, they should be a lot funnier, too.
That makes a lot of sense. My Dog this week is a sequel you probably haven't been waiting for. It's The Wilderness Family Part 2, the continuing story of a family in the wilderness that suffers one natural disaster after another but always pulls through. Darn it. Everything in the film is phony. One overwrought action scene after another. For example, the family is trapped in their log cabin. The mother has pneumonia, and the family's pet raccoon knocks over a kerosene lamp, setting the house on fire while a pack of wolves run wild outside the house, eager to devour the family dog. At the same time, the father, out hunting for a doctor for his wife, is hit square in the forehead by 10 cubic tons of snow. Yes, an avalanche, and he survives. It's just laughable. The Wilderness Family Part 2 is designed not to encourage a love of nature, but instead a fear of it.
Gene, I'm afraid to leave the balcony.
I'll help you out.
Sounds like a terrible movie. So much for the dogs. Let's take another look at the main movies on this show. Soldier of Orange is the big Dutch war epic that tells the stories of 6 friends involved in World War II. Both Gene and I admired it and recommend you see it. But we disagree about Otto Preminger's The Human Factor, starring Nicol Williamson in a story of Cold War espionage. I admired its literacy, and I vote yes. Gene found the film tedious and repetitive, and he votes no. 2 big yes votes, though, for Coal Miner's Daughter, starring Sissy Spacek in the life story of country music star Loretta Lynn. We both like the warm human feeling Sissy Spacek brings to the title role, and in fact, Gene thinks it's going to be one of the year's best films. And finally, 2 no votes for the Europeans, a stylish film adaptation of the Henry James novel that's just too lifeless to really involve us.
So what we're really saying on this show, a very strong recommendation for Coal Miner's Daughter, marginal recommendation for Soldier of Orange. That's it for this show. Next time on Sneak Previews, we'll have a special show devoted to this year's Academy Awards. We'll focus on the top 5 awards, the 4 acting categories, and Best Picture. We'll show you scenes from the top contenders, including Kramer versus Kramer, Apocalypse Now, and Norma Ray. And we'll tell you who we think might win the Oscars this year. Until then, see you at the movies.
Funding for Sneak Previews was provided by this station and by other public television stations.
Acquisition of